Hey, it's Chris America with the band Red Calling. You are watching Drums and Rums podcast.
Hey all, this is Paul from Drums and Rums with the Back Meets the Spirits. Our guest is the drummer of Tampa Bay-based hard rock metal band Red Calling. Before we jump into and learn about our guest, Chris America, and his band Red Calling, I do have a few of my own shameless plugs to start off the show here. Thanks for tuning into this podcast first off. And if you're listening to the podcast on Apple, go ahead and give us a 5-star ratings if you like what we're doing here. And then also leave us a comment. Again, those are the kinds of things advertisers look at. So let us know what you think of the podcast. Also, again, you're going to find this podcast on the audio channel, the B3 Podcast Network. So Drums and Rums, Riffs and Rhythms, Jams and Cocktails, all part of the B3 Podcast Network. So let us know what you think. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to give us a like and a follow and leave us a comment about what you liked about this episode. So here we go. Let's welcome to the show Captain America. Chris America. And I'm sure you get that all the time, right, Chris?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I get it a little too much. I think we talked about earlier that now that Christopher Columbus isn't so popular, I don't get the Christopher Columbus jokes. So,
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, it's growing up could be brutal, right? So
it's an experience. I definitely recommend it. I recommend the flip side. When you get out of school is when it's better.
Yes, I know. It's always said when you get older, you can do so much more. You get more confidence in life. You learn a little things. You don't give a shit about all those things anymore, or hopefully you don't. But
No, the best part is you get to watch your kids deal with it and just be like, "Yeah, that's right. Suck it up."
It's part
Keep
of life.
going.
It's part of life.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for coming on the show here. And again, for those that are listening and watching this episode here and say, all right, how did we cross paths here? Chris and I, and this was all part of, we have our sister podcast, as I mentioned there, Riffs and Rhythms. We're putting on a music festival, so November 23rd, if you're here in the Florida area. We are the podcast Riffs and Rhythms with my co-host, Kevin McLaughlin. We are big promoters of Florida original music in general, Florida music, great. Again, we want to hone a lot there. And, Chris and I were talking a little bit about, right, you mentioned there, you got to give some recognition to a couple of Florida bands and musicians who kind of paved the way for a lot of people, right? Standing on the, what do they call it? Shoulders of giants, right?
Yeah, Florida's just produced a great amount of musicians. Like we were talking about the Skinner, Van Zant, Click, 38 Special, Molly Hatchet. Allman Brother Band was based out of Georgia, but they also, had strong ties to Jacksonville. Tom Petty, Gainesville, Creed out of Tallahassee. What's their name? Matchbox 20, I think, came
Orlando?
out of the North Tampa area, I think is where they were. That's, like you said, Red Calling's a metal band. So I grew up in the wake of that 2000s hardcore scene. So, Under Oath, Seventh Star, Evergreen Terrace,
Obituary,
Seven Zeros, like all of that. So
right. Yeah, Tampa had a big metal scene, right?
Tampa had a scene. It was always hard rock, metal, that kind of thing. But Ocala had a lot more of the hardcore sound coming out of it. Orlando had more of the punk and the straight ahead rock.
Right.
Every city had its own offshoot of the culture, which made it fun because, you go up to Ocala and you're playing with a bunch of hardcore bands and you're not a hardcore band. Right. But if you could hold your own with the crowd,
right, there
was respect. And it was the same thing. You go to Tampa or South Florida or whatever. It was more, people were just hungry to see live music at the time. So that made growing up easy. So
yeah, that's true, right? Yeah, I didn't know Ocala had that a big of a music scene here.
Well, Day to Remember is out of Ocala. Have Wage War. They're out of the Ocala scene. Just that whole scene. My first band in 2001 Yeah, the first band I joined in 2001, the lead guitarist slash vocalist of that group, his youngest brother is the lead guitarist of Wage War.
Mm,
So the whole like Ocala scene is
just
still,
blew up.
if it's if you're new, then that you've got someone in your past that's from the scene 20 years ago. I mean, the
Mm,
scene is just recycling, and there's this constant um, just rejuvenation out of Ocala, which
yeah,
I
it's
appreciate a lot because it feels like Orlando has its ins and outs. I mean, we're still trying to get rid of the boy band mentality of Orlando. Because I live in Orlando. I live in between Orlando and Tampa. I grew up
okay.
outside of Orlando.
Okay.
So, I Orlando's my city. That's as a kid, it was that.
Yeah.
But Backstreet Boys and NSYNC have kind of ruined it for me as a musician. Kind of got to step away.
Now I remember growing up here, and when I'm originally from New Jersey, moved to Florida in '91. Finished my last year in high school in Daytona Beach, and then there was a lot of shows. We'd go over to Orlando, downtown Orlando, Church Street Station area. What was it? Beacon Theater or something like that. I saw some really heavy bands. I remember there was a show that Nuclear Assault played at, and some of the again there were some Florida bands.
Trying to think what was down because Orange Avenue changed up so much. Like,
Mm,
rest in peace, Church Street Market.
mm,
I loved that area. That was the old Orlando, but and I should say something. I have nothing against the people of NSYNC or Backstreet Boys. Orlando's just everyone thinks
Are you
about
afraid? Are
them,
you
and
afraid
there's a lot
Are
more
you
in Orlando.
are you afraid of the
Uh,
listeners are big Backstreet Boys and NSYNC fans are going to get a hate mail or
you
something?
know, their fans are everywhere. You never know who might come across this podcast. And actually, I have mad respect for the musicians out
Mm,
of those groups. That was part of what got me into more of the production aspect,
mm,
was watching these pop bands in the 90s before you were running backing tracks and
right.
clicks and everything. These guys were recreating studio sounds with their instruments live, and just the way that they adjusted something from the studio to a live format is incredible, and
Mm,
I miss that part about music. People rely
right.
too much on computers now, and not a bad thing. I just think if the computer becomes the centerpiece of what you're doing,
Yeah.
then you're kind of losing some of the soul of your music. But like Orlando, when Orlando had the boy band craze going, um, you also had the Orange Avenue
Mm,
scene, which had the social, had
mm,
back booth. You had right around the corner Church Street. At one point, you had Barbarella, which I think
oh
that
yeah.
became iBar, and then you had this over there. Like you could just go down in the '90s to Orange Avenue. You didn't care about who was playing. You didn't even know the bands. You just knew
Just good
that there was going to be good music,
music.
and there was this push for it. Tanqueray's is a great place that's still up and running, and I love going there periodically to go down memory lane. But I mean, I saw Atreyu on their
Wow.
first tour, or the second tour, whatever their first time coming through Orlando was. Um, you know, I saw so many bands. I remember there's a band that I love called Zao, and if people have not heard of them, it's spelled Zao. And the '90s is just, in my opinion, the best time period of their music because they were breaking up after every album because they couldn't stand each other half the time. So, I went to like three farewell tours before 2000. It feels like they constantly were breaking up, and different lineup every album because again they
Mm,
couldn't stand each other. So people came and went, but they were just they were this band on the indie scene that everybody wanted to play with because ev- they just drew people to them. So I saw them do shows with Unearth back when Under Oath first got on their label Solid State. They did a tour with them, same tour with Unearth actually. Um, and I knew the guys from the original Under Oath, the old school that pretty much doesn't exist and hasn't since like 2003. I knew all those guys out of the Ocala scene.
Okay.
So, go there, watch Zayo, watch my bros and this band over here, watch Unearth. Like, Orlando just had this great kind of scene going. And by 2003, 2004, it kind of just phased out. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I blame promoters for that, not the promoters of Riffs and Rhythms Music Festival, not those types of promoters. The promoters that came in and convinced all the venues they didn't know how to book bands, and you should let me book for you.
Yeah.
I'll take all the money you're giving the bands and put it in my pocket. I'm not bitter. That's really what happened. It happened, I think, all across the country. That's what it excites me about music right now. It's coming back because bands are taking ownership of their shows. They're taking ownership of their booking. They're starting to understand that the internet is a tool they can use, and it's more exciting to see live bands right now than I've not been excited in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and I think, and that was like we got a lot of, when we, obviously kind of with the podcast, the Riffs and Rhythms, and we started kind of, having people on the show or review the songs, and then once we were kind of starting to get the word out of trying to attract, vendors or advertisers, sponsors, etc. We go out on Facebook, and then all of a sudden I'm looking for vendors and advertisers and sponsors. And you say, hey, I've got a music festival coming up, and all the musicians are like, you got a what? Music festival? Do you need a band to play? It was like, it's like everyone, it's like, not right. I say, we'll take you for the next one. If this is successful, we'll definitely be interested in doing another one, maybe either next year or even possibly in the spring. So, but yeah, that's the whole point of it. I talk a lot about on the show is, I try to be avoid any type of confrontational stuff or divisive stuff. It's like, let's just have a good time. As here in West Palm, we have an amphitheater it's like the Mid-Atlantic or Mid-Florida one in Lakeland, right? You're up on the hill, you're watching music, we're all hanging out. I don't know who you voted for, I don't know what religion you are or whatever those things are, but we're here for one thing together that brought us together was the music, right? So it is definitely great to go out and see live music support, because without that, right, then life, what's the point in life, right, if you don't have music to listen to? So hey,
I need to get a sip, and we have not talked about, I am drinking just rum and Arizona energy drink.
Okay.
I know you've got something a little bit more special on your end. What was it that you're drinking again?
Yeah. So here we are drinking some Knox and Dunn. This is a Florida rum here. It's made in Florida, 86 proof. And this is straight barrels. So I know you're more of a whiskey kind of Scotch guy. So I think you'll enjoy this, and you'll be like, is this rum?
And you said that's the company that's going to be working with the festival, right?
That's right. This is our title sponsor, is Knox and Dunn. So they are our title sponsor. Big shout out to those guys. You'll definitely meet Chris. Chris, a good friend of mine. So we're tying this all together. It's a Florida rum, Florida original music. It's all about Florida businesses and all those things. So definitely big shout out to those guys. So I think there's also a tie into the name. It's like a governor or item. You have to ask Chris when you see him at the festival. Yeah. It's like what's the story behind the name? So again, cheers then, right? Do we go ahead? Yeah, that's right. Sorry.
Cheers.
Yeah, there you go. So I'll have to try that Arizona tea. And that
it's addictive.
Okay.
It's addictive.
Okay.
It's like cigarettes at this point. My wife keeps telling me you should stop drinking it. The sugar in that's probably killing you, and it's like, yeah, I probably should. But
you haven't stopped smoking either, too, right?
Yeah, well, the 3 gas stations around me, I think I'm keeping them open on cigarette and Arizona purchases. So
that's crazy. So all right, so let's jump to the let's talk about the band here. So recently you just joined Red Calling, right? How's that been going? And before we get too far into it, let's start from a little bit from your beginning before we get too far. So I know you're just recently joined Red Calling in the last few months or so, but let's kind of take a step back before we go there and kind of learn a little bit more about you as a drummer, how you got into it, because I know you've, like as you mentioned, you've performed a lot around the Central Florida areas over the last few years too. But how'd you get into drumming?
I grew up in a musical house.
Okay.
Father was a musician. church musician. So, grew up playing in church.
Okay.
Grew up being told every day, don't be a musician. And then one day it's like, damn it, you're a musician. Sit down, son. Let's have the talk. It's going to be a lonely, frustrating life. But I don't think it's been that bad.
Mm,
I made sure to stay away from church music for
mm.
for the majority of it. I figured out that's where the loneliness comes from. Um, but around 14 or 15, I started playing professionally at 14, but
Mm.
shortly after is when I started teaching, and I got into teaching at a local performing arts school, things like that. So I did that until I was maybe 20. I did it for about 4 years, 4 or 5 years. And teaching's the best thing, um, because like you have to figure out how you do something to teach somebody else how to do it.
Right.
So, when you're playing drums and you're correcting someone's technique, well, your technique better be good too, or else you're not
Yeah.
able to teach it. So, um, teaching, I think, is a great experience for 14, 15, 16-year-old drummers. I think it's a good experience in general. But if you're a younger drummer and you have skill and people ask you, hey, can you teach me this or that? Hell yeah, teach. It's going to force you to be better. Um, and then uh, played in bands all over Florida, all over the South, toured all over the place, in and out, um, throughout 2000s. I worked a job full time for a few years at Disney in the
Mm.
entertainment department. And, I'd work my schedules around performing. And if I knew I had a slow month coming up, then switch some shifts around and get out of Orlando for a day or two. But yeah, just always been in and out of the scene. If I'm not on the road, I'm in the studio. If I'm not
Mm.
in the studio, I'm in the classroom, that kind
Okay.
of a thing. And back in
Hey, hey,
2015 or 2016, yeah,
Chris, let me ask you though. So when you worked at Disney, did that kind of that the Disney? We all know Disney is very much a entertainment company,
right.
obviously, and did some of the, as you mentioned, the performance aspect or what into the production, as we were kind of talking earlier about boy bands, etc. But they were very well produced. Did some of that kind of come up while you worked at Disney, or were you around some of those things that kind
Um,
of may have influenced some of that?
so I first off, you can't grow up in Orlando and not get a job at Disney for at least 6 months to a year. Um, and so I did my time. I put in my time at Disney, but um, I made the choice to not go into the musician circle. I stayed out of it and was doing shows and parades. So I was like a stilt walker for Festival of the Lion
Mm.
King, things like that over at Animal Kingdom. And when you learn a show at Disney, it's one of these, here's the show, boom, boom, boom. And then the night that they approve you, if you do the show and you don't screw up too bad, all right, cool, you're approved, you're doing the show. But before you do the show, here's another 2 days where we're going to go over any contingencies.
Mm.
And Disney had this mentality, especially when you were in a show that involved aerial work, gymnastic,
Mm.
stunt work, fire, which Festival of the Lion King had all of that.
Right.
So there were all of these. What if a guy hurts himself here? What if this doesn't go off
Right.
there? What if the fire doesn't happen and there's no pyro for this part of the show? You still have active live fireworks that you're dancing on top of, even though they didn't go off. So um, it was just 2 or 3 days of learning every piece of what could happen, and it was always there's a human element.
Mm.
So what I took away from the shows was a you have good days and bad days. You have days you don't want to go to work, and you got to learn how to overcome that
Mm.
and still take the stage. And because music is more of my passion and more of my language, I was, again, growing up in a musical household, I was reading music before I was really talking.
Oh wow.
So, music is my first language, in my opinion. It's the feeling and the emotion that comes with it. So, um, I was going somewhere with it, and it happens. I'm getting old, but just moving on. The whole being at Disney when you don't want to, that's what it was. When you don't want to get up and go to work, you got to learn how to
Just still do it.
still push through,
Push through.
which
Yeah.
is why doing music is a lot easier because I could take those elements of what could happen on a stage. If this is this, that, or the other, if you're running tracks live, okay, there has to be a backup, or the band has to know the music without the track. So if something happens, you just pull the track and you keep
Keep
going.
going.
Um, and because I have more of a passion for music, it's easier to get up on the days you don't want to get up and show up. But um, but yeah, those are the things I learned from Disney was just how to
Okay.
push through, consider the human element, and always be ready for whatever could happen. And even if
Right.
it's digital, it could still. Computers are not perfect. They were made by humans, so they can still have problems.
That is true. Yeah. So yeah, I was just kind of interested. As you said, there's somebody else I had interviewed a couple of years ago on the podcast. Was another drummer and also was part of the performance aspect at Disney. So it was just interesting. Again, for a large entertainment company, those shows, it's very well produced, very well, like you said, practice, practice, practice. So again, we all know Disney's like the gold bar, the gold standard for a lot of things like that. So, you
I
know,
mean, they're well produced,
mhm.
but work a show for a year, and the horror stories of when it doesn't go off well, you start to realize there's no amount of production you can plan for.
Mm.
And I mean, I remember 1 year alone, we were maybe having an injury every week to every other week.
Wow.
And I mean, we're talking about injuries where you saw bones and you
Mm.
saw legs go this way or feet go that way, like just weird things, or the fire alarm goes off, and so the fire doors slam down while you're in the middle of doing an opening procession. The show isn't even started really, and yeah, I mean, 1 year, and you will then realize, no matter how well produced you make something, there's going to be an issue,
Right.
and because of that, like when I hit the stage, I don't care about a monitor mix. When I was a kid and playing with my dad's friends or playing in the first groups, you I mean, yeah, they put a speaker next to your drums, but it's not like you heard anything over the drums.
Right.
So, um, I've never been a person that gets into a monitor mix, whether it's in ear or stage monitor, because it's going to change because
Um,
there's always some lead guitarist, and Javier is not this type of red calling, which does make it a lot easier to play with them. But there's always some lead guitarist somewhere who turns his guitar down for sound check so he can turn it up when he hits the stage for the show.
they all do
So
it right. That's it.
just
Everyone admits. Yeah, everyone says
yeah.
that. Well, the good thing
Or a
is
pianist, little
that
guy on the keyboard moves it
yeah,
down. So you get this great monitor mix, and then you get off the
right.
stage and like, man, this is going to be a great show, and then you just realize you have no hearing at the end. And
'Cause it's-
so yeah, like I just learned from Disney more about how to prepare myself, and I hit a stage, and it doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. Like as long as I'm doing my job and performing and entertaining the audience,
right.
um, my my comfortability is not guaranteed. You know.
Well, I think that's interesting. Is right because if those that are listening that aren't drummers, right, is right. Everyone is supposed to be following us, right? So as long as we're marching correctly, we're confident we're marching correctly. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
that this and this because I know my parts, I know what it is, I know the tempo, and this is and everything. So if it, if theoretically to your point, yeah, you wouldn't maybe you don't really need a monitor if you don't need to cues from the other band members, whether it's the singer or the other instruments. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, but I know most of the
Well,
time.
sorry, you were saying something.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say, Chris. I was like, I always feel like whenever I play, it's like I never feel like I can even hear much of anything anyway. Too right? It usually the monitor. I don't even get a monitor half the time, and then it's like, all right, I'm just gonna have to watch.
Well,
Cues from the band and certain things, but that's about it.
like when I take on a studio gig, I generally I'm very difficult to deal with now on doing studio work, and it's not that I'm a difficult person. It's I want pre-production. I want to go in and know what I'm doing because I don't track with a band.
Hmm.
If I'm tracking with a group, I'm gonna go in, set the click, make the click feel right, and then I'm just gonna play to the click and what I feel, what's in my head. If I know the
Right.
song well enough and I have the opportunity to learn the chord changes, the progressions, if they're going to be a push, whatever it might be, I'd rather do that and then let the musicians feed off of me in that sense. Um, it's just more comfortable for me. Once you get into a room, especially a studio, ideally, perfect case scenario, everyone can hear everybody, everybody can see each other. But
Right.
that doesn't happen as much. Studios 20 years ago, studios were an experience. Now everybody has a computer, and that's great. A computer allows people to write music, record it professionally, get it out there. There's this whole process. But where you lose the human aspect is if you go in the studio, you have an engineer, an assistant engineer, you generally have a producer in the back, you have uh, all the tape going off to mix down. If it's a big enough record, you have two or three people on mix down, the band's at mix down, then it goes off to be mastered by another company. So you have 10, 12, 15 people touching one product and
Right.
none of them want it to be crap. So by the time it gets down the line, you have 15 people that have all put their
That's
best work into it.
right.
And when it's just you on a computer, it's your best work. And I love working with a group of people. So I try to get myself away from relying on anything in the studio and just rely on my feel and my pulse.
Hmm.
Then I sit in there, and if they say, "Hey, I want to do this on the bass," cool, lay it down, punch me in. I'll go back and play it.
Hmm.
But I'd much rather get out of the picture and see where everybody else is at. And usually the rest of the band is there, and I go in and say, "Do you like it?
Right.
What do we like here? Do we like this or that? Do you want me to change something that you're feeling at that part?"
Right.
But it's a lot easier to do that and let them just sit and evaluate what I'm putting out there for them to
Right.
play to.
So with you just joined Red Calling,
Mhm.
is how you guys been working on new material since joining the band? I mean, I guess obviously you've joined a band, you got to learn all the past catalog, but I guess is that some of the things you're referencing you're applying right now to Red Calling?
Um, I mean, I kind of knew half of their music already. I had known Jess through Facebook, some internet social media type. Um, I wound up moving back to the Tampa area. I've lived in and out of Tampa over the years,
Yeah.
and I had mutual friends, or she and I had mutual friends. And for me, it was like I'm just going to connect with the local musicians that are in the area that are friends with my friends or whatnot. So then I have a clique of people that I can connect with.
Right.
And so I saw them, I think once or twice, maybe in St. Pete. We've still tried to figure out where I saw them. I can't remember. There's been a lot of alcohol since then, so I can't remember. Um, but and children, they zap the memory.
Yep.
But yeah, the last couple of times they've been looking for a new drummer,
Mm.
I'd always joke around and be like, "Hey, you still looking for that drummer?" Right after they found someone. So I saw something and I was like, "Are you guys looking for another drummer again?" And and to explain kind of the situation, because if you look through the music videos, I think there's a different drummer in the last three videos. Um,
Right.
a lot of it is Destiny, who was the drummer in the band when I first learned about Red Calling.
Mm.
She was a consistent drummer. just a wonderful, rock solid person to rely on. And family and things just kind of took her out of the state. And so when you have someone that is super consistent in the band and they're gone and you have to replace that void, you get put, especially in bands, you get put in a situation where, are we replacing the instrument or are we trying to replace the person? And
Right.
the last couple of times, I think it's been more fix the instrument. So when we met earlier this year, for me, it was more of I've been stuck in a van with a group of people that I can handle for an hour, and then we're there for another 13 hours. And it's not fun. So when we kind of talked, I was like, look, let's just meet up. And she goes, yeah, do you want to get pizza? Let's get pizza. So the three of us met up for pizza and just talked and made sure we could exist in a room and at a table together before we moved to the stage and worked together as a unit.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think bands kind of lose nowadays, because again, there's that one guy in the band with the computer. There's the one guy in the band with the van. There's the one guy in the band with the money. Like
Right.
you have all these different guys, and they all service each other, but they have their spots. Where 20 years ago, you had that same thing, but you didn't have the internet. You didn't have this false sense of connection with people. You had to actually spend time with them.
Right.
You couldn't just write music and send it off to the guys and say, learn it. So
Yeah.
20 years ago, bands just had that stronger bond.
You look at yeah.
Now,
I mean, I think that's a great point, right, Chris? Is that bands that have been, you look at the longevity on some bands. Some kind of come and go, and the Rolling Stones, or certain things. The one that kind of comes to my mind, I'm always amazed with how they've stuck together. Maybe it's just part of how they were their upbringing, and they took on the world at a young age. Was like Def Leppard. They had a chance to cut Rick Allen loose, no pun intended, but and their change, a lot of things that happened, a lot of alcohol problems, but those guys are essentially the same band. And even sticking by Vivian through his health issues too.
Well, Def Leppard's a great example with Rick Allen. Rolling Stones, if you have a good drug dealer that's going to keep the drug addicts happy in your band, and you have a manager that can keep it together,
right.
You'll make it that 60 years. But I think, look at the bands in the 80s. You don't have very many Def Leppards.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a lot of the Motley Crues and Poisons, where they all hate each other and they don't want to take a stage together.
Right. Ford separate buses, right?
Yeah. And then look at the 90s and look at, even if a band broke up, they're probably back together right now. Mm-hmm. And they're probably on an independent circuit, because in the 90s, there's just this resurgence in the industry where it was fun to go to shows, and it didn't feel like a pretentious production, which is what the 80s started to become. And you look at Pearl Jam and Soundgarden before Chris passed away, like all of those grunge bands have either stayed together or come back together.
Yeah.
So to answer your question with the whole Red Calling thing, when we realized we could exist in a room together and more in a functioning working relationship, excuse me, then it was, well, I kind of know some of the music. So the first rehearsal is, let's just see if I can remember things that I've worked on. And then slowly showing me some of the newer music. We'll have 2 new songs at the festival in November.
Breaking news.
So yeah, we will have 2 new ones. And they already kind of had an idea, but thankfully I came in at a point where there was nothing solid. So I still got to write those parts and be a part of that process. But really, my whole process with Red Calling has been more what's happening live. excuse me, the beer's fighting back, or not beer, what is this? Rum. I don't drink rum enough. I felt like it was beer. It's fighting back. My my focus in playing with a band is if I'm going to be doing something in the studio and that's where it ends, then I just do studio.
Mm,
If I'm with a band where it's only live and and they want the show to be different, cool. If they want it to be like the record, well, it's only live. It is what it is. But if
right.
I'm working with a band where it's going to go studio to live, or any type of group in that situation, I tend to be more conservative in the studio with my playing choices,
Mm,
mainly because drums, if they get too busy, it's very hard to hear things.
right.
So less is more in the studio. But then it also gives me a platform to build off of live. So, okay, here's the most simplistic version, but live, I can add this energy or I can add this or that. So with Red Calling, it's been listening to those parts and saying, okay, I understand what they were doing here, but I feel like that's overstepping Jess's vocals,
Mm,
or maybe it's not as clear as it should be with the guitars. So instead of it doing it on this drum, let me do it on that drum.
okay.
Let's rewrite the part where I'm playing it or however it is. And so that's been a lot of what we've worked on, is not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but definitely changing the bathwater and getting new soap and new
Yeah.
conditioner and that new baby smell back again. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's kind of an interesting is right is when you're coming into any almost any instrument, but yeah, specifically one that's driving, like we talked earlier, was the drums, especially is right. Do you kind of play it to exactly, and then I know as you know, right, and we all drummers know this about, right, is how much the debate over Ringo, right? Is he a so-so drummer, or was he an okay drummer, or was he playing the right part for that band and what they were doing, right? It wasn't over flashy, but I mean, you've got somebody like Lennon and McCartney. He did what he needed to do to support what those two songwriters are doing. So it's kind of an interesting, kind of the way you explained it through is coming into the band and kind of assessing some of those
Well,
things
it's
that were makes.
also that Ringo debate is today's debate.
Hmm,
That didn't exist in the 60s.
true, yeah.
You know, everybody heard Ringo and said, that's what I want to do. And you listen to Ringo, Dennis Wilson, and Karen Carpenter,
Mm-hmm.
like she was probably one of the busiest drummers of that era, of that generation. All the drummers were very chill. What's his name? Mel Blanc, Mel Blaine, what the
Mm-hmm.
session guy,
Hal Blaine.
Wrecking Crew.
Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
Al Blaine?
yeah,
I
yeah,
can't remember.
yeah.
But you look at what he did, and he just cut the part and did the work.
Right.
So it's a lot easier to look at those guys 40 years later and say, "Oh man, you could have done this, you could have done that." But like, there's a great video, and anybody who watches this, check this video out. It's called "The History of Jazz Drumming." Um, I have it on DVD somewhere. It's Louis Belson does this whole video, and he's talking about the history of jazz drumming. But in that, he talks about the recording of a drum in the 1920s. You didn't have microphones to capture certain drums
Mm,
or the cymbals. So when you recorded, you had to use this part here. And that's all you could use because the microphones would make a mess out of everything else. And when they got better microphones, you got better drum parts. Better microphones, more intricate parts. And there's this kind of duality that takes place from about the 1910s when recording and production was starting to um, progress all the way through to the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that music changed, whether it was bebop or swing or this or that, the music changed based off of how well you could record the instrument that you were recording.
mm,
And so it's very easy to have an argument about a drummer 60 years ago because we can do more today
Right.
than they could then. So it's not just playing to the part, it's he wrote a part that transcended the technical issues that they had, and it supported the song.
Mm.
And that's why I think you see all of these older drummers who um, do more than Ringo. Like Greg Bissonette plays in the Ringo band, and
Yep.
Greg is a superior drummer in technique,
Right.
but Ringo is a superior drummer in the field because Ringo created something that he had to rely on his own personal feeling of the music.
To put
So,
in, yeah.
and listen to Greg talk about him. Greg has so much respect for Ringo, and that's kind of where it lies, finding
Yeah.
that mutual uh, common ground.
I think very similarly, like, I'm just thinking about it there because I did see Ringo All Star Band 2 years ago when he was down here in South Florida,
Yeah.
and then with Greg playing, and again growing up in the '80s and '90s, I know who Greg is, right? And I mean that was seeing that we had a great time, and I tell people that I've now seen two Beatles, right? The two remaining Beatles, but
Yeah.
you've seen Paul separately, and then Ringo and his band, and so, we had a great time, and but yeah, seeing him playing with Greg and then Greg doing his thing. But I think the same thing is maybe the analogy too is I could see it like in sports, right? We always want to kind of put home run records today versus home run records Babe Ruth or something. It was
Yeah.
a different kind of time period and different kind of thing and so forth. So
Yep.
yeah, I can definitely that's a really good argument there or kind of explanation about that
It's a
argument or
different
discussion. Yeah.
baseball bat,
Yeah.
and it's a different length of
Yeah.
field. It's a different height of the
Yeah. So
wall.
it's you got to
You
kind
know,
of keep everything within its own realm
yeah,
versus so let me ask, speaking of different baseball bats here. Okay. So all right, so I understand you have a monster kit and an 11-piece combination of shells, rototoms, kick
uh,
drums. All right, is this your
yes.
gigging? Is this your gigging kit? And we
Depends
definitely
on
have.
the gig.
Okay, that's
If we're
what.
the headliner for your show, it'll probably come out. If I'm the first band, I'm bringing the bare essentials to get on and off that stage for you. I'm not going to make your life hell
All
for
right,
that.
well, perfect. Kevin will be happy to hear that because he's already been warning everybody. So everybody's got 10 minutes to get off, 10 minutes to get on, and you got 40 minutes to play. So he's going to be like, pounding the beat, to get
Well, you can
everybody.
also work out backline.
Yeah,
I don't take a large kit out very often. I take it
right,
out more for what I do.
right.
In fact, um,
Okay. Here we go, guys.
so
So if you guys are listening on the audio podcast here, so Chris is showing
yeah,
his drum kit here. We were just talking about. He's got set up in his room there. So he's got a nice setup of rototoms,
yeah.
the
So,
shells. Yep. Mm-hmm.
but my way of putting a kit together, especially a large kit, is what's the purpose
Mm.
behind it? So I don't know if you saw, I have two rototoms up
Mm-hmm.
in the air. Um, that's visual. There is nothing technically productive with those drums. That is for people to see the drummer doing something when they feel like I'm being lazy. Um, I generally I started out on a 4-piece, so that's where I
Mm.
center everything is rack, floor, kick, snare.
Yep.
Um, and that those are shells. Everything else is rototons and things like that, just to add more color or variance. Um, I also, again, uh, going back to the whole working with other musicians, and just I don't care what's in my mix because I need to know my part. Um, there's also that element of listening to the room you're in and listening to the people you're playing with.
Right.
And so I've done shows, large shows, where it should never have been a problem to play drums. And the sound guy still has frequencies out of whack, and my drums are fighting the lead guitar, and we're canceling each other out. So uh, when I work with a group, I figure out where their range is.
Mm.
Excuse me. And then I put the kit together based off of where they're at so I don't fight them and I can stay out of their way. And I've just learned that rototoms, they give you the sound you want, and there's no resonance. There's nothing
The
lingering in
ringing.
the background.
Right.
So it's a very quick sound. It gets the job done and it gets out of the way
Hmm.
from a technical production side. So
Okay.
I keep, a couple shells just so it looks somewhat normal, and then just rototoms everywhere. So it's not that hard to set up because, the rototoms are clamped. I just clamp them on to the rack and I'm good to go.
Good to go.
So it looks like it would be a pain in the ass, but it's a pretty fun kit to play. So
Okay. Well, we're not sure yet. We're working to see if we've got a back. We still got to talk to all the musicians about how they feel. I think if we can provide somewhat of a back line, but I know, for you guys and AMOV, what they want to do, you guys want to do more so, probably because I'm sure there's a little bit more intricate for your guys' performance than maybe somebody's doing more of a blues style or rock style kind of stuff. But so yeah, but let's talk, Chris, about the kits here. You've got some endorsements, your kit there. So I'm still kind of have not gone too far into learning about some of these. So talk about Canopus drums, and then your cymbals. You said that these are cymbals, I guess, from South America that you're
yeah.
endorsed by. Yeah.
So so 5 years ago, I was working with a Japanese cymbal company, and I was just doing stuff as an artist, and it was nothing crazy. But then COVID hit, and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing with this, and this during COVID?" Oh, we don't know, Chris-san. That's a good question. Would you like to do it? And I went from being this random player in the United States to being in video calls with Japan at ungodly hours of the night, trying to help them keep things afloat because they're a small company, and uh, that's how I got in touch with Canopus. Canopus is out of Japan, so
Okay. Cool.
wound up, hey, we're friends with these guys. You guys should be friends, and
Cool.
then the guys on the U.S. side, we actually did become friends. So then it's like, well, you should be with our drums. Let's go, and that's how Canopus came about, and so I know the guys in Japan, I know the guys in the States,
Okay.
and first off, they're snare wires. There's no company that makes a snare wire like them,
Mm.
and if you talk to any dealer that's worked with them, they are the number one snare wire every dealer wants to work with, and it's not me talking out of pride for the company. It's just I've tried everything
Okay.
over the years, and there's just something about the sound and the articulation you get out of the snares. Actually, my main snares right here. Um, so this is an aluminum shell,
Okay.
6x14. Anybody who's listening, it's matte black, but I use, let's see,
There you go. There you go.
yeah, I use
Yeah.
a 42 strand wire on this.
Okay.
And if anybody's looking for their drum to get more articulation out of it or get a better sensitivity, just start with the wires.
Hmm.
It's not the drum. I will tell you right now, the drum does what the drum was made to do. It's the wires and the little nuances of the adjustments you make. I took off a 20 strand wire from a cherry shell that I have, and put a 20 wire Canopus on there, and it changed the pitch of the drum by about 2 to 3 notes.
Wow.
Just the wire being on there because of the material and stuff. So those little details in the drum make a huge difference, and that's where Canopus is very focused on as a company. Is it's not just the shell. The shell plays a part, but there's so much more to the drum, and there's so much more that can be taken away or added to make it sound the way you want it to. I use ash shells. They're warmer. Have just a little bit of a darker, warmer tone than what you would expect out of like a birch or a maple. Excuse me. Mahogany's going to be a little deeper. So for anybody who's familiar with the mahogany sound, the ash is kind of going to lean towards that sonic tonality, but have a little bit of a different attack. And for red calling, there's no better drum sound because I'm using like a P4 on the floor tom,
Mm.
which is just a very guttural type of sound, and where it's tuned, um, a four piece
It's
carries
just
its weight. Yeah.
right.
So, um, but at the same time, if I tune it up, I'm in a jazz circle
Right.
type of sound, and
Right.
they do the job there. So Canopus is probably the most versatile company that I've ever seen or gotten to work with
Okay.
over the years. And I have a drum, talking about America, actually. Let me see if I can get it. Do you see the stars?
Yep. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So that is a 24 by 14 copper shell from Q Drum Co. Jeremy Berman, right? I believe so. Jeremy made that for me a few years before he passed away. Rest in peace. But working with the guys over at Canopus, it's like, well, you have that from Jeremy. Like, we don't do copper shells. Use that for your stuff. We don't care. So
Right.
they're also very realistic, and they understand the needs of a musician.
That's good.
Some of
They
my
give you
shells are made.
they
Say
give you a
what?
little they give you a little bit of room to kind of, not be so set on,
Yeah.
even though they don't provide it, they give you still a little bit of latitude.
There's an understanding, and I put Canopus stuff on it because I mean Jeremy made that. So um, I use Hayward snares from time to time. Hayward is a local builder out of Orlando,
Okay.
and like he's like I've known him for years. So that's a friendship. That's that kind of thing. So that's really where a lot of the artist side goes for it. I know a lot of guys out there like to tell people, "Oh, here's how you become an artist, this, that, and the other." But it really comes down to, if you're not willing to pay for the product in a store,
Right.
then you shouldn't be the guy saying, "Hey, you should go buy this $600 cymbal,"
Yeah.
because you won't even do it.
Yeah.
Um, but there's also that relationship and that friendship that has to be there. Where, are you cool for me to work with? Are you somebody that I can
Yeah.
call up and say, "Hey, this is going on"? I had one gig where I didn't know what I was going to do on drums, and I called Canopus, and within an hour, they have me in contact with the backline company. If I
Mm.
need backline, it's there, that kind of thing. So
Wow.
there's definitely that has to play into it too. And this isn't a dig on any companies, but there's a company out there that at one point they had their thing listed on their artist questionnaire on their website. You're looking to be an artist. Here's some things. And someone made the comment, one of their artists made the comment, ask not what you can do for your drum, or what your drum company can do for you, but what you can do for your drum company. And that is BS in every element,
Right.
because um, it should be a two-way street relationship.
Yep.
And a lot of these companies out there, a lot of the younger companies, they get taken advantage of, so then they pull back. Then you have these bigger companies, which they're trying to figure out, do we want to focus on YouTube, the internet, social media, and whatnot? And at the end of the day, every company I work with, whether it's a head drumsticks or Canopus drums, I work for Domine cymbals, so
Mm-hmm.
I can't put them into the mix because I'm actually the guy that I would be complaining about. Um, the For me, it's just been about the relationships I can build with those companies,
Yeah.
and be able to represent them as an ambassador for what it is they do. And like Domine Symbols, it's a weird story to get into, but long story short, I work for their North American operations. And a lot of that just came out of, I had friends that were friends with those guys. Everybody knew everybody. We want to come up to the States from Brazil, and somehow my name got thrown in the hat.
Mm.
And then we talk, and it's like, well, can you do this? And yeah, my life has gotten boring since COVID. Everything shut down, and I took it as a chance to start a family. So now that I have children, I need some more excitement in my life because what's a 4, a 3, and a 1 year old going to do? That's not exciting at all. And so I started working with them, and my job for them is literally just all the operational needs. So I deal with the artists, I deal
Okay.
with the distribution, the warehousing, the shipping, the everything, and all those people I knew from either touring or working with those stores with other things. So um, I've taken that into this company. So working with artists at this company, it's been more about, can we grab a beer together if you're in
Yeah.
Florida? Can
Right.
we have that relationship? And
Yeah.
I think that's more important. And
Yeah.
and something else that I definitely want to say for anyone who has made it this far and they're listening, um, one key secret about artist endorsements is every company knows each other and
Mm.
we all talk. So I know some of the guys from some of the other bigger companies, and I see them periodically when we're at trade shows or whenever I'm here, there, whatever. And and you find out who's running through companies, who's just looking for the freebie or the
Mm.
handout or the this or the that. Um, some companies, they have the budget to just whatever. Am I going to get something out of you? Cool. And they look at the relationship as, oh, you want to get something out of us? Well, we have a little extra money. We can get something out of you with this. It's not going to impact the bottom dollar.
Right.
But not every company is like that. So you know the people, and you learn who's out there doing this, that, or the other, who's um, looking for the handouts.
Right.
So if
Okay.
anybody's out there
Yeah.
and they want to know about endorsements, they want to know about working with companies, it's building a relationship, and you build a relationship with the product as a consumer, and then you begin to build a relationship with the company as a consumer that wants to represent the company, and you'll get a lot further. It's the same thing doing shows. Build a relationship with the bar owner, build a relationship with the promoter.
Right.
um, you know Relationships, you're never going to replace the value of a relationship in this industry, because it's a people first industry, whether it's the
Right.
concert goer or the band or the front of
It's
house.
it's a Chris. It's a there's a virtuous cycle there. And I don't want to give a Disney reference, circle of life kind of thing, but it's a, and that's kind of what's behind renaming the audio podcast or the podcast network to B3 Podcast Network is bands, brands, and booze, right? Obviously, because the shows are all revolved around these
Yeah.
kinds of things, and it's a, how do as a musician, right? You're a musician. You're playing at a venue, and that venue sells alcohol most likely. So again, I know there's argument what I'm going to say. It just will be disputed by some, but I gave the reference to the non-musicians that you could be the shittiest band in the world, but if you got a bunch of friends that are alcoholics and they're going to power drink, which is I don't advise, but my point is you go to play at a place and that those people are spending money at that venue and that bar or whatnot. I know it kind of takes away the musicianship, but again, it comes back to the business side of it too, which is, like I said, I know it's a little controversial, kind of what I'm saying, but it's a point that I'm making too.
I mean, there's the business. I don't really think of it as a controversy, for me, just because, I mean, at the end of the day, you put butts in the seat. Let's say you're
Right.
at the amphitheater.
Right.
Are you packing out an amphitheater? If you're not, then they're not going to book you for that.
Right.
You have to, as a musician, have a healthy respect for the venues you're playing in and know what your purpose is. If you're playing in a band, like you're just top tier musicians, and you're only playing venues that have a strong fan base, those venues have a strong audience that goes every week. Like, let's say a performing arts center in the middle of BFE, Florida, because I've done these shows too many times. You go to the right performing arts center, and they're going to have 1,000 or 1,500 people who just want to see a
Mm.
live performance on the weekend.
Right.
And they don't care if they know who you are or not. If they're told this is going to be the spot to be with all your other performing arts center friends, they're going to go. And your job is to come in and deliver the entertainment that that performing arts center has guaranteed their people.
Hmm.
Now, some of these spaces, they don't do alcohol. Cool. If they don't do alcohol, that means they probably have a higher ticket. So now
Right.
you have to deliver $25, $30 show for
Right.
each of those tickets versus the $10 because they're making money on alcohol. So yeah, if you have a bunch of professional drunks that follow your band, you're going to get shows. But then where do you go from there? And
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
next part that people don't want to talk about
Yeah. No.
is,
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
And
I've got
again,
my 50 drunk friends. Let me come to your hole in the wall bar and we'll blow it out. And it's a
right.
great show. And the guy's like, well, buddy, I'll give you $200 just out of the tips. That's cool. But
Yeah.
if you've got 50 professional drunk friends, you're not going to play a bar with 500 people
Yeah.
because you've only got 10% going.
Right. And I think that's kind of more of an analogy more for, again, what, you know, obviously what the music festival isn't, obviously hashtag no covers is, you know, maybe more in that sense of cover bar bands, right? You know, you will probably get some of those gigs. And again, like
Yeah.
I said, going back to the opportunity to play original music is very, there's not as plentiful venues or opportunities as, you know, I mean, you know this, but yeah, in that analogy sense though. But yeah, all right, so Chris, I've got a, you know, again, I know you're a big fan of the show, you've watched episodes, so you know what's coming up here. It's the rapid fire segment here.
All right.
All right, you ready for this?
Give me a second.
All right, okay, all right, so here we go.
Let's go.
Our rapid fire segment here is in 4 beats or less. Number 1, who's on your Mount Rushmore of drummers?
That's actually going to be Jeff Porcaro, Terry Bozzio, Louis Belson, and Jimmy Chamberlain.
Okay, all right, okay.
I've got 10 tops, so that if we're doing 4 Rushmore, like,
well, I know. I always say that somebody did actually flip the script on me and said, "Well, it's my Mount Rushmore. I can have how many ever I want." I'm like, well, I guess that's true. I didn't actually just say. And I said,
no,
no,
I've got 10, but
okay.
those 4.
there's only so many mountains you're gonna have to carve. Then I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So in question number 2, in 4 beats or less, one piece of advice you'd give young drummers.
Relationships.
Okay.
That's it. You know, like we've said this whole time, learn how to build a relationship with the musicians you're playing with. And that relationship means learning how to listen to the musician, learning how to listen to yourself, contribute to the conversation between the instruments, build a relationship with your teacher so then you can have a healthy path to learning more or as much as you can from the teacher. Have a healthy relationship when you leave that teacher and go to the next teacher. Have a healthy relationship being a teacher to someone else. It's all about relationships. You should either be putting something in or receiving something that you can put in later.
Cool. All right. So question number 3, what social media drummer do you follow?
None.
So not even Stepario. I guess that I don't know how many non-drummer friends I have that keep sending me videos of him.
I watch a few, but I don't follow any of them.
Okay.
I can't tell you what they're doing, what they have. And the reason is even the 2 that I watch, they're the only 2 drummers that I've seen step out of YouTube and play with a live band, and it didn't feel awkward. And that's Quibus and Luke Holland.
Okay.
And I've met both of them. Quibus is one of my most favorite people I've met over the years. Just wonderful. But those are the only 2 guys I've seen work with a band that they can get out of YouTube. I don't see enough YouTube drummers playing with real musicians.
Yeah.
So
it's all solo right by themselves. Yeah. Playing to attract to their music. It goes back to what you said about companies and with endorsements and how do they want to grow, as a social media or whatnot. So Okay. All right. So question number 4 in 4 beats or less here. The craziest thing that happened at a gig. Too many to think about?
I mean, there's a few that come to mind, but I probably can't mention them on YouTube. Um,
I'll check the
no,
explicit boxes and let you change the names to protect the innocent, or maybe
I
not
mean,
innocent.
I can put it this way. Like craziest things that I've had happen. I was in one band. We broke up before every show, and I was the one that started it before every show because if we weren't pissed off at each other, we sucked when we were on the stage.
You
When
weren't in the
everybody was
band
pissed off,
You weren't in the band ZOA, was it? Right?
no, no, no. But I learned that from Zayo for that reason. I watched Jesse do it, and they always played better when they were mad at each other. But I mean, I've played bars where there was plexiglass and chain fences across the front of the stage. I've played bars where it's nope, you got to get out now for one reason or another. Uh, it's yeah, I've had some weird experiences to say the least.
All right.
I've watched members have guns pulled on them because they went over to get paid for the gig and the guy didn't want to pay the gig. Like
Oof.
yeah, so
Wow.
concerts usually when you're on stage and this is, being cut from the hardcore indie scene cloth. Um I mean anything goes in a show. So I nothing has ever surprised me. It's more like what happens before or after the show. It's like, oh, this is the weird parts. Okay, cool. I'm too focused on doing whatever I'm doing on the stage
Right. To
for
be worried
me to
about everything
notice.
else. Right.
Yeah.
So, well, cool. All right, you made it through. Again, you become part of the
Yeah.
esteemed alums now of the Drums and Rums show. Like we talked
Cheers.
earlier about like joining Dom, Tito, a lot of others that have been on the show. So you're now part of the alum family, as I called it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this has been a very cool
And
conversation. Yeah, go ahead.
if anybody hearing this has not heard the Dom interview, they need to
Mm,
hear the Dom interview because it does not matter the platform or whatever. You will always learn something from Dom. So
yeah.
that's always a good interview. I went through everything and I'm like, oh, that's cool, that's cool. Oh, wait, Dom, that was the first podcast I listened to from this just for that reason.
Very
I
cool.
wanted to see what it was about.
So
So
I got some credibility, right?
I mean,
It's okay. You can say it.
I was going to jokingly say Dom took every call in every interview he was ever given, but
No,
I didn't
you,
want that to sound bad either. So yeah, but
uh,
no, it was good.
yeah.
And what are you going to have the podcast set up over at the festival?
That is a plan. We're what we're trying to do is in between. Yeah. So again, for the just to recap, is Riffs and Rhythms Music Festival, November 23rd. 9 bands, and what the plan is in between, I guess in 20 minutes, within those 20 minutes, Kevin and I have talked about just doing a short little podcast snippets, just jump on real quick and push it through the PA system and just kind of, maybe we'll bring bands on, do a little quick interview, post or pre, and just kind of talk up, kind of keep people entertained in between the sets, rather than just playing music, right? So that's kind of the idea. I don't think we're going to live stream the podcast because there's probably too many technical difficulties that'll happen with it. But I think, yeah. So I guess the short answer to your question is most likely.
Cool.
Yep. So,
And
but
that'll be just the B3 altogether. So
yeah.
anything and
So
everything. Yeah.
right, yeah. So under the B3, like if you go searching for, I'm thinking if you go to search in Apple, Spotify, if you search for Drums and Rums, it should pull up and should still be able to find it. That's why I kind of still left it saying formally Drums and Rums, just to kind of give people. Again, it's a 4.5-year-old. Um, what do you call it? Yeah,
My phone.
yeah. Yeah, it's a four
All
and a half
right.
year old audio stream. So again, I know it was a big shift, to kind of make this and bring everybody over to that existing thing. So, but definitely. So, all right. So again, in here in closing, Chris, comments, remarks, promotion. Here's your shameless plug segment here. What do you want to promote for yourself or for the band, etc.? Here you go.
Man, what do I want to promote? Well, I mean, you got to check out Red Calling. So there's that. Got to check out the November 23rd festival because we'll plug both you and I on that one. I mean, but honestly, like uh, mental health, I'll plug that. That's music is probably the best thing mentally for people. So if you don't play an instrument, find an instrument, play it. If you know, if you if you're struggling, because the world's not exactly been easy the last couple of years, and um, Jess, Javier, and I have talked about that a lot. Is we've seen a lot of people coming to the shows talk about their struggles and what they've gone through. So if I were going to plug anything shamelessly, it would be if you're going through anything and need to talk to someone, find a way, talk to people, and take care of yourself. And come to our shows, talk with us. We'll always be an ear for you on that. But yeah, at the end of the day, if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anyone else. So
Right. No,
that would be my plug. Mental health.
all right. No, that's perfect, Chris. And again, I think there's a lot of talk about that going around, and a lot of things, and again, just people taking care of themselves or others looking out for each other too, and maybe some of that does exist where, we are very, I'm not saying us, but generalization
Well,
that we're very absorbed into
you
our
mentioned
day-to-day.
something earlier about you could go to a show and not worry about the politics or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think right now people have lost the ability to build relationships and communicate to people. And loneliness is becoming a reality of that lack of relationships. People don't know how to build.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what is hurting people right now. And being able to build a relationship with someone on both what you agree on and don't agree on is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And none of my friends think exactly like I do, and I love them all for it. So yeah, that I've seen it more. So that's been my plug with people is just, and for myself is
Right.
feel like you've got things together than be an ear for somebody else.
Right. No, that's a good point there. So
Yeah.
very
But
good. So
I think it's what do we need to wrap up soon?
yeah,
I'm just looking at the clock.
yeah. So all right. So we'll go ahead and wrap up here. So I'd like to
Yeah.
thank Chris for coming on the podcast and talking about drums, music, Red Calling. Again, can't wait to see you guys in person. Please check out the Drums and Rums podcast. Give it a like and follow. Lots of other great episodes are out there. Again, we're under B3 Podcast Network. I think you can still search for Drums and Rums. Again, we just did a little rebranding to kind of grow. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, all the other socials. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Get out there. We're trying to get to 500 followers. Again, we're just trying to grow these things. Check out the website, the Drums and Rums. And then thank you all for having a great day. This is where the backbeats meets the spirits. Thanks, Chris. Great conversation
And
tonight, man.
just extending out the offer, I'll be up in Indianapolis at the Percussive Arts Society convention going on. So maybe that week, if you want, I can come back on the show right before. We can talk about the week before the festival.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
maybe also give your audience a little sneak peek at what Domine Cymbals is doing up there, because that'll be our official North American launch. So
you got it.
if you want, just invite me back. We'll make it happen.
Dude, you got an open invite. You're an alum now.
There we go. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, man. Good. Appreciate
All
it,
right,
Chris.
you have a good day.